Hey, welcome back to Iron Anchor Cycles. I'm Shep, and we're back with the final installation in our 2004 FX DXi build series. So this bike, hopefully you've been following along with us. This bike has been basically the everyman Dyna, the stunt Dyna, the everything you need, nothing you don't, really just everything you want to do to get a bike ready to stunt it. So we started with a pretty much bone stock 2004 DX and basically did everything you need to do to get it where we wanted it. Right now, we're in the final home stretch and we're doing this last segment of the video, really less about the work we did in the hard parts and all that other stuff, but really this is about the motor. So obviously, like I said, if you've been following along, you know that we went a little above and beyond on building the motor, and now it's time to get this motor dialed in and get it on the dyno. So we just finished putting everything back together. We did the little steps we needed to do. We've got the oil pressure built up and primed, and we've got the battery charged up, and we're ready to go and do a little bit of heat cycling on this. So basically we've got to do kind of a first start on the motor. We'll run it for a couple of seconds, just see how it sounds, make sure we don't hear anything weird, see anything weird. We'll check for leaks. We'll do a couple more heat cycles, and then we'll get it up on the dyno to continue heat cycling and then do some break-in on it. So I'm gonna go ahead and fire this bike up, and we'll see what we got. Well, I don't know about you, but I think that sounds pretty mean. So obviously we've just got a base map in here. We don't have any diagnostics hooked up to it. Don't really know if our air-fuel ratios are where they should be. Should be pretty close. The base map we made for it, I think is not terrible. So that sounded real good and real strong. Obviously it's cold, so it was idling kind of high there, which is all right. Helps to get that oil moving around. But basically what I have to do now, like I said, is just we're gonna take a look around, we're gonna check for some leaks, and then the next thing is we're gonna keep doing this, but we're gonna move it over onto the dyno. So I'm gonna cut the video off here, we'll come right back, and probably with the bike on the dyno, and we'll start to see where we're at. Okay. So we finished with the heat cycling, and at this point the next step is to start doing some low RPM break-in on the motor. And what we're doing in this first section is keeping the motor right around 2,000 RPMs in the 2,000 to 2,500 range in order to seat the cylinders, seat the piston rings to the cylinders properly and get them broken in. So the first 50 miles of the break-in are super critical, and we do this, it can be done on the road, but we do this on the dyno with some load put on the rear wheel to simulate riding conditions and not sort of let the motor run away with no load on it. But from here, basically what we're doing is riding the bike 50 miles, and that first 50 miles keeping it to about 2,500 RPMs. So we'll vary the speed, we'll vary the load, and we make a very conscious effort keeping an eye on the temperature as well, and the air-fuel ratios to make sure that we're not putting the motor in a bad situation while we're doing this initial break-in. So we're not going to show you this whole thing because obviously it's just a lot of me sitting on the bike, carefully monitoring everything and basically riding 50 miles. We do it over maybe 4 to 5 different sessions, letting the bike get up to operating temperature, shutting it off, letting it cool down, and then doing it again, getting up to a total of about 50 miles. So as you can see, I'm basically just paying attention to everything, keeping an eye on everything, and going through it all. So this is the first step after the heat cycling, and we'll come back and show you what happens after that. Okay, so the next step in the process is to start moving into the higher throttle positions and higher RPM ranges. So as we were doing the lower areas, we were tuning at the same time and getting our air fuel dialed in that bottom range. And now we're doing the same thing, but with more throttle position and more RPMs. So basically what I'm looking at is the power vision, which you can't see, which is sort of in front of me, and the air fuel graphs, which are over my left shoulder in this shot, and making sure that we are getting all of the cells in every position we need to in order to get the full tune done. So we're kind of doing two things at once here. So we'll start to move into even full throttle runs, which is what I'm doing here. This will be the first one, and you'll see there's a little bit of backfire on the decel, which looks kind of cool, but we'll certainly tune that out. All right, so as we move further through the process, we'll continue with all the areas of the fuel map. We're now looking at some more diagnostics on the screen, and we're doing some data logging so that we can really get everything dialed in. So here what I'm doing is getting ready to do another full throttle run, and this is a little bit further down in the process, and you'll see that that decel backfiring is a little bit less than it was before, but that decel stuff we get to pretty much at the very end of the tune. So we'll work that out at the end, but basically this is just a lot of repeating and dialing in and getting everything to be as close to perfect as we can. So I'll take a look at the screen, at the graphs, and kind of see where we are and just keep plugging away. All right, so we've got a little bit different camera angle here so I can show you in a little bit more detail some of the individual steps that we take. So what I'm doing here is we've basically completed most of the map on this bike, and we're done with our auto tuning sessions. And now we're starting to look at doing some manual tweaking on some of the areas of the map that are critically important. And one of the most important areas is your cruising AFR, or cruising air fuel ratio. So what I'm doing here is getting the bike up to cruising speed in the top gear, which for this particular bike is, we're calling it about 75 or 80 miles an hour in fifth gear on this bike. And we want to look at what our air fuel ratios are and make sure that they are maybe a little bit leaner than where we are for the rest of the map, so that at that particular point in the map, we can be a little bit more efficient and maintain our fuel economy on the highway. So I'm going through this and looking at it and getting to where we need to be and looking at the air fuel graphs, and then we'll shut it down, we'll adjust the map as need be, and we'll go from there. All right, so here's our next session, and we took what we saw in the last one, which was that the air fuel ratios at cruising speed were a little bit rich. We made an adjustment, and now we're gonna get the bike back up to cruising speed and take a look and see where we're at. So right now I'm getting to that point and just trying to get zeroed in on the right speed there, and noticing that the graphs are leaner, exactly what we were trying to target. We picked up a couple points there, and we are just about perfect at this point. And I think I'm about to realize that on the camera, and there it is. That's the spot right there we were trying to get to, and there's my thumbs up. So now with cruising AFR done along with everything else, this bike is finished on the dyno, and we're gonna take it down and give it a ride, and we'll show you guys what the results were.
All right, so we just finished up with the bike on the dyno, shot through a bunch of footage of that, and hopefully what you just saw was a little bit of voiceover that I did, kind of showing you some of the things that we were doing in there. Just a little too loud to be able to kind of walk through what we're doing and try and explain it. But suffice it to say, we got it heat cycled, we got a bunch of sort of break-in miles on there to get the rings seated properly on the pistons and inside the cylinders, and then we went at it and got the bike tuned and ready to go. So got the bike back on the ground, sitting outside the shop here, and we're gonna go rip it a little bit and see how it does. But just a little recap on kind of where we are. Obviously the bike's looking great. I think this is maybe one of the first times we kind of had it fully done, you know, back together here on the ground. Obviously the pipe's got some color in it now because obviously it's had a bunch of heat going through it. Everything is super tight. Brakes are working fine. Everything so far is good. Obviously no leaks anywhere, which is a really, really great thing to not have to deal with anything like that. And if you take your time and follow the steps and do things the right way, you probably won't have any leaks. That's just kind of the way it goes. So we're happy to see that that's the case on this one. So we're gonna go rip this a little bit. We'll shoot some of that, show you what happens there. And we'll just wrap up and do a little once more on kind of what this bike is and what we did. So stick around. All right, and just like that, not sure how many parts later, the build is done on our 2004 FXDXi. So we rode it, we dynoed it, we burnt a little rubber off the rear tire, and just got it back up here on the lift to do a quick oil change to get that braking oil out of there. It's got about 100 to 150 miles on it at this point, so it's a good time just to get that first oil out, put some fresh in just so that you can keep things clean, and any of that break-in wear, little metal, anything like that that comes off from your new components, just get it out of there and have some fresh oil in there to run it. So I'm just gonna recap real quick what we did here. If you've stuck with us this long, I'm sure you know exactly what we did on this bike, but I'm just gonna go through it all once together now that it's done, just so we can have a clear picture of what we did and why we did it. So obviously, just starting at the top here, we've got a set of bars and risers we did. This was in an effort to get you that proper riding position where you can have as much leverage over the front end as possible so that you can really throw it around, and it's great for stunt riding, but also just for regular, canyon carving, doing the twisties. A set of bars, getting those hands just about chest height is where you want them. These, from the stunt perspective, are probably a little lower than you might run for just a regular cruising perspective, but you can see more about that or anything else we did here in the specific videos we did. So bar risers, rebuilt our front end. We've got a new front tire on here, new front rotors, calipers, brake lines, fresh fluid, rebuilt master cylinder. So everything nice and fresh up here. Obviously our motor, we did a T-Man 98-inch Street Performer kit on it. We've got an Arlen Ness Big Sucker air cleaner behind here, and we've got Trask's stainless 2-into-1 pipe. For the cam chest, we're running S&S's gear drive cams, 585s, and their cam plate and oil pump. Those are easy start cams, I think I just said. So moving back, we've got a Saddleman gripper seat that we had customized with our logo on here. Holds you in place, looks really good on the bike. Did miss up here the crash bar from FXR Division. So moving back a little further, we've got shocks from RWD. These are a 14-inch shock, and then we've got the shock mount frame sliders from Bunking. Then moving back here, we've got new pads in our rear caliper, along with a new rotor stock size to match the front rotors we did from TC Brothers. Haven't put a new tire on yet because we're gonna destroy this one before we take it off. And then moving to the back, we obviously changed our tail light plate, our license plate bracket, our tail light and base plate, and eliminated the turn signals from the side of the bike. Okay, so looking at the left side of the bike now, we've got our Tracker Die chain kit on here with their ultralight sprocket and their black X-ring chain. So this is all on, loosened up a little bit after we rode it and broke it in. It's just about where we want it right now in terms of its tightness, so I'm happy with that. Nothing really else to speak of on this side. I mean, we did do a set of Thrashin P54 foot pegs on here, but that's pretty minor. This is also, I think, Tracker Die's shift peg on here as well. Did a little bit of powder coating of a few chrome parts, but otherwise the left side of the bike is pretty much as it was other than the chain drive. So the absolute final thing let's talk about now is let's take a look at what the dyno chart looked like for this bike. Okay, so I've got the dyno chart up on the screen now, and you'll bear with me because I'm not looking at it while I'm giving this narration, but you guys can see it. And hopefully what you can see is a really respectable power and torque curve for what used to be just a good old twin cam 88. This bike, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head of what it would have made from the factory, but you better believe it's probably in the neighborhood of about 75 horsepower and probably, I don't know, 85 foot-pounds of torque, something like that. And probably not a super nice looking torque curve either. But now what you can see is we've got a really, really respectable power and torque number for a 98-inch motor. And we weren't trying to make something that's gonna be a drag racer or something like that. We were trying to build a bike that was gonna be really rideable, really fun, and just really strong all the way through the power band, and that's what we've got. We're making peak torque maybe a little bit higher than what you might wanna see, on some bikes, but we're very happy with peak torque around, I believe off the top of my head, it's 4,000 RPMs, somewhere in there. You'll have to tell me you're looking at the sheet, but, and then peak horsepower is all the way out at the end. I mean, this cam will just keep going if you let it. So, we shut the rev limiter off at about 6,200, I think, but I'm pretty sure if we let it go further, we could probably get some more power out of it. But honestly, no need for that on this bike. This 108, 107 numbers that we're looking at is absolutely perfect and just what we were looking for on this bike. So take my word for it, it's an absolute blast to ride. So that's it for the dyno numbers. Hopefully you saw some of the little bits of fun that we had riding the bike. There will absolutely be more to come as we start to put this bike through its paces and do some more with it. Probably more riding and braking than building and wrenching, but we'll see what happens and we'll see how it goes. So hopefully you enjoyed the series. We'll be starting a new one hopefully pretty soon. And in the meantime, I'm sure we'll have a lot of little projects just to, keep things moving along. But like I said, hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you next time.